Good morning, good evening, or good afternoon, depending on when you're watching this video. I'd like to welcome you to our second webinar of the Coimbra group of Brazilian universities. In this seminar, we will discuss scenarios of resuming academic activities in 3 different institutions around the world. My name is Virgílio Almeida. I'm the Director of International Relations from the University of Brasilia. And with us here, besides our enlightening guests, we have the Executive Director of GCUB, Professor Rosana de Souza. We also have here Professor Milton Asmus, the International Relations Directors from the Federal University of Rio Grande. And our moderator is Professor Valdenor de Barros from the Federal University of Uberlândia. I would like to thank beforehand the presence of our 3 guests and of our moderator as well. It is a pleasure to have such a large audience. More than 500 people have registered to this webinar. Including representatives from international organizations, embassies, a council of deans, associate universities, as well as deans and vice deans, professors, researchers, students, and employees from universities located on the 5 continents, all of whom are partners of GCUB. In the next seminars, topics will cover international cooperation research at a distance, changes in university management due to COVID-19, internship, extension and practical classes, and we hope you will be able to join us on them as well. One last information before I pass the word to the moderator. Questions will be made through the Slido platform, whose link you can find on the description of this video. So without much further ado, Professor Valdenor, you have the floor. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I would like to thank Rosana and all the participants like Dr. Mildred Garcia, Dr. Damiano Pinnacchio, and Dr. AbdelJalil Akkari. If I make any mistakes regarding the pronunciation of your names, please correct me. It's a pleasure to have you here. Our presenters will have 20 minutes to share their contributions. And after their presentations, we'll have a question and answer period. So we'll leave all the questions towards the end, because I think this will be more interactive. We can have all the 3 participants share the answers to the questions that are presented to us. So we'd like to introduce, we'll begin with Dr. Damiano Pinnacchio, and then in the sequence, we'll start with Dr. Mildred Garcia, and then with Dr. Akkari. Well, I would like to introduce Dr. Damiano Pinnacchio. He's the coordinator for the International Relations Office at Tor Vergata University of Rome in Italy. In his job position, he has been leading the international cooperation agreements with foreign universities and institutions. He has a background in economics, and he gained experience over 15 years of progressively growing responsibilities in the international cooperation fields. He was member and coordinator of many working groups that developed joint projects in education and research, in partnership with institutions located in Africa, Asia, East Europe, Latin America, and Russia. He was also a member of a working group that fostered the process of internationalization at home, the development of curricula in English, as well as development of dual degree programs and mobility for students and academics incoming and outgoing at Tor Vergata. As representative of his university, he's an active member and participates in the meetings of many international networks, such as APAE, EAIE, UNICA, which is the network of universities in the capital of Europe, the Coimbra group in Brazil, EUA, BRICS, EURM, and many others, as well as projects related to Erasmus Mundus, Technical 1 and 2, Brazil, Bermundos, and others. He's been very active in the EAIE community, and for the period of 2018-2020, he was elected as a member of the EAIE Expert Community Cooperation for Development. In 2019, he was elected as IRO Chair and IRO Observer on the Steering Committee of the UNICA Network for the period 2019-2021. In May 2020, he was elected a member of the EAIE Board for the period 2020-2022. So thank you, Dr. Damiano Pinnacchio, and the floor is yours.
Thank you for the colleague of the Coimbra Group Brazil for the invitation. And thank you, Professor Walden, for your kindly presentation, very huge presentation. So I will give you a snapshot of the activities and the reaction and activities that has been made in Italy by the government and by the university in this pandemic COVID-19 situation that affect and change completely our habitat and behavior in not only in Italy but everywhere, unfortunately. And we hope that it can be solved very, very soon. So I just share with you the presentation. I don't know if you see it. You see it? Okay, and just start with a very brief focus on the COVID-19 pandemic situation in Italy. As you can see, the most of the cases was in the north of Italy, because this part of Italy is more related with the industrial, commercial activities, and have many connection with the international region of the world. And it seems that some of the cases start in this region and develop, as you can see, in a very huge way. And the number of infected people is more than 200,000 in Italy, many dead, more than 30,000. But fortunately, the health care system react very well, and the measure of the government give the possibility to reduce the spread of the virus. And as you can see, many numbers of cured people has been made. So here, just a little bit, very shortly, a timeline of the reaction of Italy. As you know, probably Italy was the first country in Europe that react to the this pandemic situation, and the first cases we have in at the end of January with 2 Chinese tourists. And then quickly, the reaction of the government was to close of the connection with China and the very pressure points from the this virus. In February, there was many measures that has been taken, like the emergency situation declaration for all Italy, measure to mobility restriction, especially in the pressure points, the region that was that have many infected people, and followed the interrupt of public events, and was banned all activities that take in consideration assemblage of people. So the main message that was launched was the distance, the social distancing, and the personal cure of in order to avoid and limit the spread of COVID-19. In March, the situation became very hard, and there was a lockdown for all Italy. All mobility was blocked, and was possible only move in the city for emergency reason or to buy food. And all at the same time commercial activities and firms was stopped. The only activities that was authorized was the production and distribution of food, and followed the stop of all kind of sports. And this was taken till the second part of May, when start the second phase, because we saw a decline of the infection and started a gradually mobility in the commercial activities. In all this situation, I would like now to focus on the university action and activities. As university Italian system, we were lucky in such way because between January and February, we have the break between the first and second semester, and we have some session of exams. So at that time, many of the student population and the university community was stopped the activities, and some of the job was very reduced. So this was a good situation, because university received the alert from the government and started the process of implement all the technological tools to boost them in order to switch the most of the activities from the presence to the distance learning formats, to the digital format. And in that case, the reaction was very, very high, and the 94% of the program was transformed and switched in a digital format. In February, the situation that was related to the exam session was very, very careful, and there was a lot of information that the university authorities provide to the students and to the professor in order to contain and limit the spread of the virus. So was fostered the social distancing and the compulsory use of facial mask. And the exam session was split in a different one, and in order to avoid the social assemblage of people. And then we arrive in March, and in March, when the second semester started, it was all the activities switched in digital format. And during this time, there was experimented a lot of tools, technological tools, in order to provide and have exam session, and also final dissertation defense and discussion in digital format. What was the principal activities and reaction of the university? In February, whole university was closed completely. So was forbidden the access to students, and limited whole access to the university buildings. So no access to the library, no access to the buildings. And at the same time, in parallel, was implemented a series of services for students, professor, and staff, like the distance learning program that was testing, and many other services to support this period of, we can say, isolate moment of for students and professor. Activated some psychological support line for the students, and in line with the government initiative, we provide for students and professors a series of digital extra activities, like to give them the possibility to participate to digital visit for a museum, digital excursion, and participate to a series of cultural activities related to the web. In the second part of March, when we go as an Italian system to the ceiling of the infection, also the activities of the staff, the normal job, the administrative job was stopped. So we start and booster the smarting working, so to use to work from the houses. How would the university manage the mobility in this situation, very hard situation? There was a very intensive moment of exchange of information between the university and the international partner from one side, and the authorities like the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Education, and the Ministry of Health. All related with the diplomatic authorities in the different countries, in order to have a clear situation of what was the epidemic virus in the other countries. And there was also a very intensive exchange of information between our students that was abroad in an exchange period, and international students that were here to spend a period of exchange or to complete their educational program, in order to manage the situation in a better way. As you can see here, I get some data, some numbers from international students. The 60% in these months, very hard months, choose to return in their home countries, and the 40% remain to the host university. And more or less, the percentage is quite similar for Italian students. The 70% of the exchange students return back to Italy, and more or less the 30% remain in the host university. And all the family of the students and the students as well were always in contact with the international office and the international office in the host university, in order to have the information, the real information, and the safety of our students. So we stay in contact with the students every time. What about the exchange program in this period? Because many of the students suspended or postponed it. And according with the authorities related with the Erasmus program, there was an agreement, a negotiation that extends the program of mobility in the period of the mobility with some additional semester for the students that didn't have the possibility to complete their program. And there was a very reaction, not only for the Italian university, but we check also for and have the proof that also the university in all the world was very reactive in provide and switch the educational program in the digital format. So there was a process of recognition of all the courses provided in for the exchanger semester approved, and as well as of the internship program related to the students that just complete their educational program. And also in this case, there was an extension of this period. More or less, the situation was quite similar for the overseas mobility, so extra-European exchange program, and for the dual degree program. So all the students didn't lose the months, the activities that they started, and they didn't finish in presence within the host university, but they continue their program, their education in distance learning. And the university made a lot of effort and to recognize all these kind of activities, using also the support of some we can say some tutor in order to help these kind of students. Just a focus on the effect of this boom and the force boost of the digital transformation, this moment, because was unexpected situation. So I just split this effect in two sides, from the point of view of the institution and from the point of view of the students and family. From the point of view of institution, as you can see, they need a huge investment from the budget of the university in order to be ready with the digital platform and be ready to provide this program in the education in distance learning format. And it was also permitted thanks to the effort, a huge effort of the ICT staff in the all institution, because as you can imagine, when you use the technology and new tools, there was always some problems that arise, and that was very, very efficient in manage this situation. And we experimented also on some inexperience for many professors to manage these, we can say, smart education, and use these technological tools. Because one thing is to have classes in presence, to look the students, to move, to use the blackboard. Other things is to stay in front of a video, a computer, and to talk with the people by the video. And it was necessary also to have some session or training session in order to give them the basic knowledge to use these new tools. And what was interesting to give and to complete the courses was a combination of the direct video lessons with recorded one, in order to be to match all possible situation. And one of the main difficulties that the university managed was the activities in the laboratory, because you know, in biology and engineering and other laboratory was very hard to work in a distance in a video, or to work with the picture in order to make experiments. From the student side, you know, also for the developed countries, there was some very difficulties and problems related to the technological hardware and software. So in these months, we saw an investment from the family to have a different connection, so a faster one that was give the students the ability to be in line and to connect with this platform, and also to buy some additional computers, because there was the problem that at the same time students and family and parents was at home. One to attend courses and work for study, and another one to work at the same time. So there was some difficulties in these aspects. And then we saw from some interview that there was a lack of attention during the video lesson, that was completely different, of course, to attend a classes in physical presence. But from the other side, there was a good combination and a flexibility in the time management, and use the combination of direct video lesson and a record one. That was very good for them. The future perspective, just a focus on this, according with the measure of the government, the Italian government, and the indication from the Ministry of Education for the first semester of next academic year. It seems that if it's possible, a good choice is to return in physical classes modality in order to complete and continue the program. And the blended format and national, international level probably is the most that we will use in, especially in the first part of the next semester, because there is we need to understand what happens in the virus spread in at the beginning of the fall. And there was some indication to reduce the international physical mobility, at the, especially in the first semester. And but at the same time, we used to launch the call for the exchange program for the next academic year. But in the most of the case, we used to postpone it in the at the end of the first semester or at the beginning of the next one. So from January 2021, not before. And there was indication to use and to give access again to laboratories in order to continue the practical experiment, but in a limited numbers and a different session in respect to the social distancing. That is the most important. And one of the most information and news that we received from the Ministry of Education, it was to have no university fees for the next academic year. So in order to give an help to the family and to the students to be involved in a university program, because as you know, this was a crisis, epidemic crisis, so health crisis, but at the same time there was a economic crisis, and the effect of the economic crisis we can see, we can start to see in the fall. An estimation, and you can see also from the number of an estimation at the moment, it seems that the 20% we will experiment in a reduction of new enrollment for the next academic year. It seems that the 20% of abandon of the current students because there was difficulties and no possibility to have access to digital programs. It is a very bad situation. And all of these has an effect in terms of the institutional activities, because reduce the financial resource available for them. So it is necessary and needed a very huge public investment for the higher education institution, especially for the public one, because as you know, the public institution in Italy is not able to get financial resource from the private sector. So I'm going to the conclusion because my time is going to finish. And I think that a combination of digital and classical educational program for the next future will be one of the very important tools and characteristics to be competitive for the university. And public investment is very, for the digital infrastructure, is very needed, because not only for the institution, but especially for the family and for all the territory, in order to give them the possibility to have access to this kind of program and activities. A training programs on digitalization for professors and staff in this new era is very welcome, because give the possibility to be very strong and manage this situation. And the creation and strength the digital services is a value added. But the most important that I would like to underline is that the technology development have not to avoid and limitate the access to education, because this could be a very bad situation for the future of our generation, because in this way limited the access to education for many people. And I don't think only in the to the developed countries, but especially for the underdeveloped countries. So thank you very much for your attention, and thank you for the invitation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Damiano Pinnacchio, for your contribution. It's very enlightening to learn from our friends in other parts of the world and to see how many of the problems are common. For example, regarding accessibility to technology. We thought this was a problem common to South America and Africa, but not necessarily a problem in Europe, for example. Well, anyway, we have a set of questions, and we'll leave the questions towards the end, as we mentioned earlier. Now, I would like to introduce you to Dr. Mildred Garcia. She earned her degree, Doctor of Education degree, or her PhD, and an MA in Higher Education Administration from Columbia University, and has wide academic and administrative experience. She has been the president of the American Association of State Colleges and Universities, AASCU, since 2018, and is a strong advocate for public higher education at the national level. She was the first Latina to lead one of the 6 presidentially based higher education associations in Washington, D.C., and she was appointed by President Barack Obama to serve on the President's Advisory Commission on Educational Excellence for Hispanics, the U.S. Secretary of Defense to serve on Air University's Board of Visitors, and the U.S. Secretary of Education to serve on the Committee on Measures of Student Success. She presently sits on the boards of ETS, National Center for Higher Education Management Systems, and American Academic Leadership Institute. Prior to joining AASCU, Dr. Garcia served as the president of California State University in Fullerton, president of CSU Dominguez Hills, and the CEO of Berkeley College. She has held both academic and senior level positions at Arizona State University, Montclair State University, Pennsylvania State University, Teachers College, Columbia University, and the Hostos, LaGuardia, and City Colleges, and the City University of New York. She's also a much sought after speaker at national and international conferences, and an academic researcher who has published numerous academic journal articles and contributed to multiple books. She actively promotes partnerships between U.S. higher education institutions and societal, cultural, and higher education systems of other countries, and has received many honors and awards, including the Hispanic Business Magazine's 100 Most Influential Hispanics in 2007. Dr. Garcia, it's a pleasure to have you with us. And we'd like to hear from your experience in the US, and you'll have 20 minutes to share it with us. Thank you.
Thank you so very much for that lovely introduction, Dr. Walden. And thank you for the invitation. It's a real honor to be with my fellow panelists. I'm honored to be with them. As you all know, this global pandemic has shaken us to the core now internationally and definitely in the United States. Social distancing, face masks, hand sanitizers, temperature checks have become the way of life in the US, and the death toll is staggering. In the United States alone, more than 120,000 Americans have died from this virus, and more than 2.3 million Americans have tested positive for COVID-19. In the United States, as I listened to the news this morning, cases are spiking in states like Florida, Arizona, California, even as the nation starts to reopen. Young people in the South and West are increasingly testing positive. And unlike what we heard from our colleagues, we do not have a country strategy to move the coronavirus out of the United States, but left up to the governors of the states to do their strategies. In March, we had a country that shut down completely. We immediately in our higher education institutions moved right away to online. And this is increasingly problematic in the United States. There are 18 million college students in the United States across all sectors. And the organization that I'll tell you a little bit about later, AASCU, enrolls 3.5 million of those students. Our college and university presidents are under tremendous pressure to make calls on what they will do in the fall. During the summer and in that last part of the March through June, students were online. We had students who had no laptops, had no Wi-Fi, some were homeless. And so campuses had to rethink how they were going to serve all of their students. We had presidents absolutely giving out laptops to students and delivering hotspots so that they could have Wi-Fi at home. And even on some campuses, they kept the library open so that students would have a place to study. The decisions they are making now have a great impact on access, on this generation, on educating the new majority of the United States. And it will have long-term impacts. I speak to 2 to 3 presidents a day, speaking to them about what they are going through in their campus, what's going on in their community, and how they are going to move forward for the fall. As of mid-June, 2/3 of the roughly 1,000 colleges tracked by the Chronicle of Higher Education were planning to resume in-person instruction come this fall. However, we have seen systems like the California State University system, the largest public university in the country, with over 23 campuses throughout the state of California, saying that they will go into online hybrid teaching and learning and opening labs, as we heard earlier, by staggering people, ensuring that the labs would continue. Just a little bit about AASCU so you know the next data that I am going to share with you. We represent over 400 public comprehensive institutions. That's 42% of the nation's public four-year institutions. And we enroll more than 3.5 million undergraduate students. Our mission, it has a historic commitment to the underserved student population, the poor, the students of color, the first generation college students, in a learning and teaching centered culture and a dedication to research and creativity that advances the region's economic progress and cultural development. Our AASCU institutions educate a large share of first generation college students, students of color and low income. And we have the community college system, which those students transfer at higher rates into AASCU institutions. AASCU institutions move the greatest number of students from the lower socioeconomic strata up into the middle class and beyond. And so we are educating what will become the new majority of the United States. The research on regional comprehensive publics in the United States is clear. AASCU institutions are the engines of opportunity and social mobility. As I said earlier, helping them to become engaged citizens and productive members of our democratic society and communities, and having economic independence for their families and their communities. So in March 2020, a survey by the Association of American Colleges and Universities found that presidents, 70%, expect their revenues to go down because of the coronavirus. 64% are saying that they're optimistic that their campuses will return to being open in the fall, but it won't be business as usual. They will be the masks, they will be the testing. In our residence halls, many are going to only one person in residence halls, when it used to be 2 to 4 people in a large residence hall. And then 36% are really little worried that there may be disruptions, so that they're thinking that some institutions, because not everybody's doing the same thing, some institutions are opening up earlier and finishing before Thanksgiving. Others are opening up later and then finishing much later on. And then you have those who are saying, we're not opening, we're going to do this hybrid model or completely online. You know, as I speak to these presidents, they tell me what's keeping them up at night. And there's so many things. As we heard earlier from our presenter, the teaching and learning. Our faculty moved so quickly to online. Some of them had not taught online before. How are we going to do the professional development, the quality of instruction? How are we going to make sure that that's happening? The equity issues regarding the laptops and students not being able to afford a laptop and Wi-Fi, looking at research and how do we make sure that the important research that goes on in our colleges and universities continues in our labs. And then of course, there's the loss of revenue. So our students pay tuition. And so many of them are unemployed. Many of them won't be able to. The government subsidy is not high enough to cover everything that the students will need to pay. We will lose international students. International students were a source of revenue for our institutions. We know very well that that is not going to be able. We're thinking about athletics. How do you do athletics? How do you do music? How do you do theater? How do you do dance? How do you prepare to reopen safely with the plexiglass and the little arrows on the floor for 6 foot of social distancing, having the money to give out to all the students for masks, for making sure you have the sanitizer? How do you set up classes with social distancing? All of these things are keeping presidents up at night. And so right now, our institutions are looking for solutions on how to help the most vulnerable of our institutions. And so there are some institutions that don't have the resources or the big endowments that some of our institutions definitely have. And so one of the solutions for our most vulnerable is that the United States government did have a stimulus package, and they did give out dollars to help the students who are the most vulnerable in order to continue. Certainly not enough money, but it is something that will help the students as they go through this pandemic. There is some talk about increasing the federal subsidy for the low-income students called Pell. So that is another recommendation that's going through our government. Our institutions are using their resources and scholarships in order to help those students to make sure that they are coming back. One of the latest research studies by Strata said that over 50% of Latino students in the United States are changing their plans about going to college. And that is because they're unemployed, they have to help family. And so they're very worried that we're losing that generation. And over 40% of African-American students who are also considering changing their plans in higher ed. So each of our institutions are looking to reach out into their communities in order to ensure that our students are coming back. Because as you know, in the United States, it is the students of color that are going to be the new majority, and not educating these students would bring detriment to the country, to the state, and to the students' families. Our institutions also right now are preparing for the loss of fall enrollment for all the reasons that I just explained. And so they're extending the deadlines. They're doing scholarships. They're going into the communities. They're thinking about what are the strategies, because right now we are laying off some faculty and staff, furloughing some faculty and staff. Institutions are merging across the country. So this is having a tremendous impact on the higher education system in the United States. So some other things that our campuses are doing. Colleges and universities have deepened their commitment by buying laptops, as I said earlier. They are keeping the food pantries open In the United States, we have food pantry because we understand that many of our students are food insecure. They are keeping residence hall open for the international students that couldn't go home. So at AASCU institutions, we have about 1,500 Chinese students who could not go back home. And so they are being taken care of by our institutions. And so they are definitely going into their communities and working with partners to find out how they can help those students and communities in order to make sure what will happen in the fall. The economic impact, we don't know how deep it's going to be, but we know that there's a recession that is deepening in the coming months. It could create a meltdown for many families, and we don't know how deep the economic impact will be to our institutions. And the one thing we do know, and what AASCU is working with our institutions, is that we simply cannot afford to lose a chunk of our higher ed infrastructure and leave this generation of Americans behind without access to higher education. And so as we look at what else we can do and what institutions are doing in conclusion, we are looking at deepening our hybrid. How do we alternate the number of students that are coming on campus? Some online, some at home, ensuring that we have the resources to give students laptops and Wi-Fi and make sure that they can get some food through our food pantry. We are looking at ensuring that we continue to fight for state investment in higher education, ensuring and telling people that higher education is a benefit, not an expense. We are working with the federal government to see if we could increase dollars to those who are the most low income. Our institutions are looking at teaching and learning and faculty development and staff development. How do you serve an institution from afar? How do you make sure that students are learning with the quality of learning that we want? How do you measure that? And how do you look at state and federal dollars coming together to help our institutions? And so that is what we're going through in the United States. I look forward to questions, and I'll now turn it over back to Dr. Walden.
Thank you. I'm sure we're going to have a very lively last 30 minutes with chats and questions on these topics. And it's, as I said before, it's really enlightening to see how the different experiences have in common, how much the different experiences have in common. We're all talking about human lives and the effect that this disease has had on the economy and on education. And it seems that many of those problems really are affecting all of us on a global scale. Right? Well, thank you so much. Now I'd like to introduce Dr. AbdelJalil Akkari. Yeah, thank you for being with us, Dr. Akkari. He's a professor and the director of the research group on international education at the University of Geneva, Switzerland. He is also a visiting professor at the Al-Farabi Kaza National University in Kazakhstan. Dr. Akkari is a regular consultant for UNESCO and other international organizations. He has a lot of administrative experience also. He was the Dean of Research at the Higher Pedagogical Institute, HEP Bijun in Bienne, Switzerland, and assistant professor at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County in Baltimore. His academic work concentrates on the field of social sciences and education, and he's currently researching on education, schooling, and identities in multicultural contexts, and also on the global citizenship and global citizenship competencies and the role in higher education today. In 2008, he published a well-known book by Sage entitled Educational Ideas from the Majority World. He has also published widely on a variety of relevant topics, such as on schooling and its contribution to community development in African countries, on the role of international organization in the increasing attention given to the concept of global citizenship. He has also written on different aspects involving intercultural and multicultural education. And he has added to the international debate of the global citizenship concept as he analyzes the key issues regarding global citizenship education across the world. Well, Dr. Akkari, it's a pleasure to have you with us, and you're going to have 20 minutes for your presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your nice presentation, and thank you for the Coimbra group of the Brazilian University for this panel. So I will be in 20 minutes sharing with you some point and some experience of the University of Geneva linked to the COVID pandemic crisis. So I will be speaking in 4 points. In the first one, I will tell you how was the management of the pandemic at the University of Geneva. In the second point, I will be speaking more widely about this crisis and the impact on education. The third point will be on the question of equity as a pillar of higher education. And I will end by speaking some point about pedagogy program for distance learning at university level. So let's start about how we did at the University of Geneva and how we can describe our responses to the COVID crisis. So I may tell you that Switzerland was affected as many other countries. Well, we may be in the middle of the affected country, and we are currently in the step of being progressively out of the COVID crisis. So as I am at the university and I'm involved also in the management in my department, psychology and education, I may say that the University of Geneva tried to manage the crisis by the participation of all actors in the management of the crisis. Indeed, you may know or not, Switzerland is maybe the most decentralized country in the world, and our university is also a very decentralized institution. So we really had full participation of the administrative staff, the academic staff, student support services like ICT, building, library. And I think something very important in our institution is the student voices. So we did, yes?
Sorry to interrupt you a little bit. Could you move your microphone a little bit away from your mouth? It's producing a funny sound.
Yes, I'm sorry. It's better now?
Yes, it's better now. Thank you.
Yes, sorry for the noise. So I was telling you that we are taking a lot of energy to give voices to students. So I think what we managed to have some general rule in the whole university, but we had also specific rule in each faculty and in each department. So maybe the big problem is linked about participation is costly in Zoom meetings. So I think our staff is now very tired after 3 months of crisis. But we are, as public university, we are managing this crisis with a very humanistic way of dealing with the crisis. For instance, we are having extended temporary contracts, particularly for researchers who were not able to collect their data during 3 months. So we basically will be extending many contracts. And so we will need a lot of public funds, but we have the support of the state of Geneva. So I am moving to my second point is what's about the general crisis and the general impact of this crisis on higher education. I think basically I see that this crisis is in 3 steps. So we have the crisis, we have the recovery, and we have the reconstruction. So here in Geneva and in Switzerland, during the crisis, it was really very difficult the first days because it was a sudden crisis and we were not prepared, and it was a real emergency. But now we are in the recovery period where we have a lot of solidarity between different category of people working at the university. We have a lot of creativity, and we are preparing the transition. So now the building of the university is open. There's some people working at the university like me today, but other at home. So we are in the middle. But we are still thinking about the reconstruction of our university. Indeed, we need to develop differently our university. We need to do a reform. But what I can tell you today that I'm not able to tell you if the University of Geneva may be better or worse after this crisis. I think it's really open. And what we know that we need to be better prepared as institution and as individual to the next crisis. My third point is about equity as a pillar of higher education. It may be strange to speak about equity in Switzerland, but we are struggling with a lot of issues related to poverty, to social problem, and what about equity at higher education? I think when we speak about distance learning, we need to distinguish 3 levels of distance learning. We need to discuss, first of all, access to technology. And I think in Switzerland, at least we do not have a lack of access to technology. Everybody is connected. So I think we succeeded in the level of access. But we have a second question is about the use of technology for learning. And here we need to do a lot, because what we observed with this crisis, that our staff and our students lack training to use ICT. So it's good to have your notebook, to have a Moodle platform, and to have a lot of technological resources. But if you are not prepared to use them, they will be useless. And the second question, and it's an open question, what are the impact of distance education at university level on learning outcomes? I think here we have really many space to do more research to try to understand the consequences of distance learning at university level on learning outcome. So I will be now ending my intervention by speaking more about technology, about pedagogy, and about what kind of answer for distance learning at university level. And I may share with you some problem we have at the University of Geneva. I think, first of all, we need to understand that when an university decide to switch to distance learning, it's not only switching, it's really a big trouble. And we need to have some indicator to know if we are succeeding in having this switch to distance learning. So I will introduce to you some indicator and concept, a very few, to see if our university is succeeding in distance learning. So the first indicator is about availability of distance learning to our students. I think the big problem we have is the lack of content, at least ready content for distance learning. Many of our professors have a lot of content, but they need time to that the content be ready to distance learning. And this crisis gave us no time to be ready. So I think we have a very weak readiness for distance learning, particularly in social science. The second indicator I want to share with you is about accessibility. So accessibility is linked to equity, but even in a rich country like Switzerland, sometimes there's economic accessibility is limited for some category of people. But we need also to think about single mother and young parent. They need to, in the same time, to work for the university at distance, but also to do the schooling of their children at home. And it's really a nightmare for them, and it's a problem of accessibility. The third indicator is about acceptability. Do our students accept distance learning? So the answer is not really, because we have a lot of complaint from our students about assessment, evaluation, about also the having exam on a distance platform, about also increasing work of the student, because many professors asked for more reading, and the consequences is to have more work. The fourth indicator is about the adaptability of distance learning. I think the most big problem of distance education at university is not about technology, but it's about pedagogy and readiness. And the last point I would like to share with you to understand if our responses to the crisis was good or bad is about the quality, relevance, and pertinence of our program. I think maybe the biggest change in our university is that distance learning put more responsibility on the learner, more responsibility on the student. Of course, more responsibility on the teacher and the academic staff, but the biggest responsibility is now on student, on learner. They are with more autonomy, but they are lost in the same time. So I think we need to work on the post-crisis very hard on learner autonomy, how we can train our students to be more autonomous, how we can train them to be more responsible for their learning, and how we can train them to have more solidarity among students and to help each other. Thank you very much, and I'm looking for your questions.
Thank you. It's a pleasure listening to you always. We've got questions from all over the country and from elsewhere. I would like to start with the question to Dr. Pinnacchio. It's Professor Uriel from the Universidade Federal do ABC in São Paulo. He wants to know, how did the pandemic affect the calendar for next year, the university calendar? How are you rearranging your classes for next year? You're going to go online again? Are you going to have face-to-face classes? When do you start? How did it affect it?
Thank you for the question. Well, I mentioned some of these aspects in the presentation because we, at the moment, the plan is to start the first semester of the next academic year in a blended format. It means that at the beginning, we will start with the distance learning classes, but we mix up with the presence classes. So this is why, in order to not to create situation of assembly. And in this way, we plan to split classes in the morning, in the afternoon, and some courses we provide in distance learning, some other in presence, especially that one that need practice and laboratories, because in this way we can keep the social distancing. And I mean, these are the expectation until the end of the year, according with a decline of the spread of the virus. because there is attention now for in the fall. Because as you know, there are some seasonal disease that more or less could be confused with the coronavirus. And this is the major worry of the Ministry of Health. And but we hope that for the second semester of the next academic year, from January, we can be in we can restart again the most of the classes in presence. And we also plan to receive exchange students and also to send our students abroad. But for international students at the moment, in the first semester of next academic year, we will use the distance learning outcome.
Thank you. There's a question from Lucia Pinheiro at the University of Brasilia to Dr. Garcia. She says that many of the problems that are keeping the presidents of the American universities awake are very similar to those down here. But she says that our government has offered very little or no help at all. So she wants to know, how is the Trump administration doing in that regard? Are you getting help from the government?
There is some help from the government, but as I said earlier, this administration has decided that the governors should take care of their states. And so the governors has taken on the responsibility of how to manage the coronavirus within the states. There has been some help, as you saw in the state of New York, where they did bring up the big ship that they brought over as a hospital and helped with military to build one of our convention centers. But by and large, the strategy on how to move forward in the states has been left up to the governors of the states.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Dr. Akkari, Laura Pires from São Paulo, again, she would like to know, how does online study affect professional development in certain careers, for example, like in engineering, where there's a lot of practical activity and manual activity?
Well, indeed, at the University of Geneva, the crisis is lasting only 3 months. So for our professional school, like for doctor, for teacher, for engineer, I think we are developing a lot of tools in virtual reality. So instead of sending the student on the field, we are doing simulation. And indeed, in my department, we are having a lot of resources to make, for instance, our clinician in psychology having cases, virtual cases instead of real cases. But our hope that in my university, indeed, we will end the academic year in 1 month. We are in the exam. We will not have delay. But for next year, we decided to have distance learning for 1 semester, except for professional training, where we are adapting our program to make professional training having face-to-face classes, while other courses, they need to be at distance. So basically, this is the solution we find, but still the situation is in evolution each day. So we have the situation today, maybe tomorrow we can open a little bit more, because really this pandemic, the news is changing almost from morning to the afternoon.
Yes, thank you. Dr. Garcia, you mentioned a lot of data in your presentation, numbers and percentages in this. Professor from the Federal University of Alagoas would like to know if these data are published, available online, or?
They are, and I could send it to someone of whoever you'd like to send the data, so that you can see the reports that are coming out about our institutions. They come from different sources, like the Chronicle of Higher Education, the Strata Corporation, Foundation, etc. So I will make sure that you get that data. You just let me know who you want me to send it to, so that can be distributed.
Thank you. There was another question for you. This is from Universidade Federal de Minas Gerais, Thales Almeida. How are institutions, AASCU institutions, what are they doing in terms of adaptations for physical installations when students are allowed to go back to campus? If I got this right, they're not.
Right? Looking at social distancing, number one. Number two, the mask and the sanitizers, number two. In addition to that, they are using plexiglass. These institutions have to spend on plexiglass now for areas like advising or areas like financial aid or the Student Success Center. As I said earlier, in our residence halls, they are redoing the residence halls so that only one person can live in the room versus 2 to 4, and making sure that that is happening. In the labs, they are alternating and the times that people can go into the labs and social distancing in the lab. So some students would go in the morning, and then they would have a couple of hours, and some would go in the evening. And so they are all setting up. It's not normal, and it's not business as normal anymore. It is absolutely using what we call the CDC guidelines in order to ensure that the institution is doing all that they can to keep their faculty, students, and staff safe.
Okay, thank you. Vanessa from Alfena, she would like to know if students, you mentioned some kind of aids that some students are getting. Where's this aid coming from? From the university budget itself, from the local states, or from the federal government?
It's both. The institutions I serve, they get a percentage of their money from the states. And so many of our institutions have state financial aid coming from the state, and then the institutions take that money and distribute it to the students. We also have something called the Pell Grant that is given by the federal government based on a formula mostly for students in need that helps them with tuition, basically tuition and books.
Okay, thank you. I guess this question goes to all of you. Rafael from the University of São Paulo. I would like to know how to deal with administrative decentralization in this type of crisis. Faculty's autonomy versus central orientation. Like, should we have a general institutional guide, or should faculties decide on their own? How to deal with this, bottom up or top down kind of decision? Okay, Dr. Akkari?
Yes. So I don't know if Switzerland is a model to be discussed, but indeed, even for social isolation, for instance, in our university building, all thing is open, but the building is empty. So there's a lot of self-discipline, indeed. And for the work, there's a lot of specificity. So basically, academic staff is allowed to work at distance, mainly. Administrative staff or people in management position, they need to discuss with their hierarchy. So I think the flexible system is very good, but I would like to share with you that our administrative staff are asking to be back on building. Today, I had some meeting with some administrative staff. They are not anymore supporting distance work because they are not used to. So basically, our secretary, our library staff, they do not want to follow with at distance work, and they want social relation. They want to communicate with other. And indeed, I think maybe from now to 2 months, we will be going back to normality, if I may say.
Thank you.
In the United States, as you well know, there is much independence of our institutions. And the institutions, first of all, have a board of trustees that really looks at all of these situations, as well as something that we call shared governance. But when it comes to when the institution is open, how they're going to move the administrative, they listen to the faculty, but the administration is the ones that makes those decisions. As far as the classrooms are concerned, of course, there's independence of the faculty, But now with the coronavirus, if the institution decides they're going to go completely online, then the faculty will do their content and their academic responsibilities online. But every institution is different in the United States on how they move forward during this pandemic. And those decisions are made basically by the board and the president of that institution, listening to the faculty, staff, and students.
Perfect. Damiano, would you like to make any comment?
Yeah, basically more or less is the same in Italy, because universities are independent each of other, but of course they have to discuss all the time with the public authority, local authorities, and that we have some input and instruction from the Ministry of Education to check with the local government how is the situation, so we can have a restriction in the north of Italy if the situation still remains as is at the moment, and less restriction in the south and the middle of Italy, because the infection situation is different. At university level, we don't have a real independence of the faculty department from the central administration. Is a hierarchical one. So the central administration, of course, have a discussion, debate with the faculties department, but take the decision by central. So they decide to have a kind of restriction that is have to be the same for everyone. And probably they can discuss with the School of Engineering of the biology to have different access for the laboratories respect to the School of Economics or Literature, to have to keep less more restriction for the use of the building of the libraries. But more or less is the decision comes by the president and the board of director, basically.
Thank you. Another question that can be answered by all of you comes from Paula from Colombia. She would like to know, how has research been impacted, and how do you think research can be handled in the future after this pandemic?
Maybe I can start.
Yes, please.
So research is really affected by the COVID in many dimensions. The first dimension is data collection. You know, in different faculty, we need people, we need cases, we need to go to school, we need to work with people. And when you have 3 months without any access to have data, really there's trouble with having data. And school are not allowing us to be back to classroom until next year. So imagine doctoral student or researcher with the private funds, they are paid, but they don't have any funds to follow their research. So what we decided in our university is that when the funding agency are not able to make the contract more month, our university will support the additional cost. So we are working hard to find solution for different category of researcher. And I think the other thing is related to publication. Indeed, we have also a lot of union, we have a lot of young researcher having trouble and telling us as professor what you will do for our academic advancement, because we will not be able to publish as planned, and we ask you as authority and as institution to adapt your assessment of our academic career. So I think this is the 2 main points in my university, at least.
Thank you.
Dr.
Garcia?
What we're seeing in the United States is very similar. I would say that we put a big emphasis in the United States on keeping our health centers, on all of those who are working to try to find a solution to the COVID-19 crisis. So there has been People have been going in for those things. The other types of research has been difficult. It's been very difficult for our faculty to take care of, for example, their animals that they have in the labs. It's been very difficult to bring in the collaborative research that you usually do with teams and within communities. And so, as I said earlier, many of our institutions are trying to find solutions so that they are bringing in the research teams really by straddling them in different times, social distancing, using our CDC guidelines. But there's no question that the research efforts in our country has been affected.
Thank you. Dr. Pinnacchio?
Yeah, research, I would like to divide, to split the research related to some school as medicine, biology, engineering that needs to use experimental test daily in the daily basis, respect to the analysis and of data and order. Because we in Italy we worked in the past years a lot on the open access tool, and that give the possibility to connect many of data and research publication for PhD students and for young researchers in order to give them a useful help to continue to publish and continue to work. From the other side, we have to, I would like to underline that there is a huge project in Italy to connect all the libraries and research data set that could be useful, used in a very easy way in the physical buildings of a university, as well as in a distance learning, using the credential that the university provide for the user. So I think that in these, in some aspect, the research projects are not very, very affected by the crisis. In addition, we can also mention that the flexibility of the European Commission for the European project in order to extend the deadline for the project and the possibility to give additional time for our researcher and our professor to complete the project that is open at the moment.
Thank you. There's a very interesting comment here. This professor says that with the pandemic, everybody's talking about this new normal, right? So what does this really imply regarding university education? How will this pandemic affect what's to come? Can we make predictions, or it's too soon to make predictions? Are our university systems going to change? What is really going to change? Or we cannot make these predictions yet?
You know, I would say that it's really hard to make a prediction. As a matter of fact, we in our organization are having a webinar of what will higher ed look like after the pandemic. So it is a very difficult thing. But I think for a while, I think Dr. Fauci here in the United States has said that the COVID-19 will be around for a while, that we will be operating differently, that we will be looking at our institutions in this many ways that the whole panelists have talked about for a while, until we get a vaccine and a solution to COVID-19. You know, as you know, we were talking about research, for example, one of the beautiful things about research is that it's done with multiple countries across the nation and going to different countries. And right now we can't even do that. And so there are different ways that we're going to be operating. We just don't know how long, and that things will be different. How different? I don't have that crystal ball.
Yeah.
So So maybe on this point, I'm not saying that I'm glad with the COVID crisis, but as I'm working a lot in what's so-called in Africa emergency context or education in emergency, when the COVID came to Geneva and Switzerland, we become all educational system in the world and all university in emergency. And I think what is interesting in this change, I'm not sure if it will be something structured in our university or it will be something that will be over in a couple of months. I think it's very difficult to say. But what is interesting, I think, is we discovered that we are not prepared. And we discovered that it's not only a matter of having good laptop, good connection in internet, it's also a matter of content, pedagogical goal. It's about also how to prepare our staff. So I think this crisis indeed is an opportunity to revise and to rethink the way that we are training our students. And I mention it again, I think we need to train responsible students that they are independent in thinking, in initiative, and to take care of their learning. And I think in most universities, at least in my university, until now, we are not able to teach our students as independent thinker and to take care with the problem of learning and the problem of society. And I think this crisis is also interesting. It opened the university. It opened the university to social problem, to make their contribution in the solution of the problem of society. So, but it's not the answer to your question. I think we are still in the crisis to be able to give some answer.
Yes, thank you. This student from Mozambique is concerned that a lot of the research that goes on in the university gets funded from different means, but they're committed to certain dates, they have deadlines, and they have papers to publish. And if they're associated to a graduate program, there's a certain limit to as far as they can go. So his question is, do you have any suggestions of what kind of strategies can be implemented to help those research experiments that had to be canceled or that were interrupted? I guess we will have local answers, but I decided that I could share this question because you might be facing similar contexts of different research which has been interrupted and that relies on funding or that is committed some kind of deadline, how to go about it.
I think, in my opinion, we discover that we need the state. Even in the most liberal society, and you know, Switzerland, maybe on the economic level, we are one of the very liberal society, but on education, we have almost only public education. So I think, but in my opinion, with this crisis, we discover the need of public funding, we need of the regulation of the state, and we need, for instance, for research, that our big national agency to understand that their mission is to help young researchers to follow their study and to put more money in the system. So I think, in my opinion, I know that in Mozambique the state is fragile and probably it needed some external funding, but I think we discover everywhere in the world that the state do not do everything, but we need the state.
Thank you. Dr. Garcia?
In the United States, I would say that we get funding math, the sciences. I think they are being very, they're being okay in extending the deadline. So I would suggest to the student, if that's the kind of agency, you go and you speak to them. Same thing with foundations. Foundations are understanding that there has been a delay. So we have a grant with the wonderful Gates Foundation. And they already said to us, we are delaying everything. It is okay. We understand that there's a crisis. So at least for us, those agencies, may they be federal, state, or the private foundations that we have in the United States, they have been very flexible in letting people be slower with their research results, their reports, etc.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, I agree with the word of flexibility. The donors have to be flexible in this period to give additional time and to give also additional resource to the research and to education. Because I don't know for the other countries, but in Italy, we invest not so much in education and research. And this pandemic situation underline these not very good attention to this topic, because it's very important, education and research. Just a very short comment for the previous question related to the effect and of this pandemic on the society. I think that we discover and we focus on our attention on a different value, not for the physical one, the mobile or a car or laptop or some other like this, but a more very important value. That is the sense of the community, the cooperation, and the health between people. This is the most important that probably we can keep in the future, and this is the lesson that we can see that we learn from this pandemic situation, and probably that give us more open eyes on the problem of the society. Many government, just to mention some action, are related to the investment in a green investment. So about the transport, about the research program, about the many other activities with the focus of the attention to the sustainability. And probably it could be a guideline that university itself can invest, and the government can follow some of the action that already taken about that.
Thank you so much. With your comment, we'll move towards the final comments. It's been a wonderful experience, and questions keep popping up, and I can't leave this out. Although I would like to ask you to make your final comments after this question so that we can round this up. But the question has to do with the psychological aspects and the mental health issues that that result from this lockdowns and from this isolation. How are our universities dealing with this? Are we offering any kind of assistance, or is this not an issue at all, or is it an issue?
In the case of Geneva, it's really a big issue, and as I'm in the Faculty of Psychology and Education, we managed to organize a hotline, not only for the community of university, but for the whole community. And we have expert psychologists, many people, doctors, who are 24-hour hearing the question of people. So it has a cost, but we manage in the faculty to organize this service, and I think it's very important. What we observed is a lot of tension between administrative staff, academic staff, tension between assistant professor, full professor, etc. So I think the consequences of this crisis, we need to deal more about the mental health of our staff, and we are a little bit worrying about the next fall, because when people come fully on campus, we think that we will have difficult situation, and we will keep an eye on this hotline and this new service that we created through the COVID experience.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Garcia?
Yeah, in the United States, we are seeing many, many issues for all faculty, staff, students, and even our presidents. I mean, sometimes forget that the presidents have a tremendous responsibility on their shoulders. And so we have to remember that. And so the things that we are doing here in our institutions, AASCU institutions in particular, of course, counseling. We have counseling for our students, our counseling centers, our health centers for our students. But through our human resources offices, we also offer that for staff and faculty so that they have those connections. The other things that we're asking that our institutions are doing is reaching out to the students in multiple ways, through social media, through connection, through Zoom, because it's extremely important for us to remember that it's not only them, that some of them are even dealing with family members who have contacted COVID, or people that have passed away in their families. And how do you work with these individuals as you're trying to have them work from home? So it is definitely an issue. Our institutions are dealing with that, and within the resources they have, and also using their community-based organizations within their communities.
Thank you. So many lessons learned. Dr. Pinnacchio?
Yeah, we provide this kind of service for our students and staff for the community. Well, in the past was more focused on international students, you know, students when they change completely culture, completely places, and need some support. And in this pandemic situation, we extend and reinforce this service for everyone, for focused on the fear about the health situation, the virus, and what could be the effect on the short term and the long term, but as well as also our colleagues works a lot on what is called in a psychological literature cabin fever effect. Because when you are isolated for a long time, probably you create your environment, and it's very hard, and you are scared to move and to leave your situation. So there are many aspects that our colleagues are working on in order to keep the mental situation and hold the expectation of our, we can say, university community at all ready for our restarting in such way. To manage the actual situation and restarting. Think positive to the restarting.
Thank you. You know, we'll have to apologize for many of our participants whose questions could not be answered, but we have reached our time limit. So I would like to thank you, Dr. Akkari, Dr. Garcia, Dr. Pinnacchio, for your wonderful presentations, your very, very, very enlightening comments. I would like to know if Virgilio, Hosanna would like to make any comments, and please, the mic is yours, so for your last comments.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Walden. I'd like to thank Dr. Damiano, Dr. Garcia, and Dr. Akkari for such a wonderful opportunity to learn about their challenges. The experiences are really invaluable for our own universities, since we are at an earlier phase of the pandemic, and we will have to face similar, if not the very same challenges that you have faced, at least some of them. Dr. Garcia, please, the information about the research you mentioned, you can send to Rosanna, and we'll make the link available on the description of this video so that everyone who's watching it can have access to it. I would also like to thank Dr. Waldenor Moraes de Barros for moderating this webinar, and personally apologize for skipping the paragraph I had prepared earlier to introduce him. When I opened the seminar, Dr. Waldenor holds a postdoc from the University of Ottawa with research about internationalization of higher education and linguistic policy. He is the Director of International Relations from the University of Uberlândia, and currently He's also the director of the Council of International Relations Heads from the Association of Federal Institutions of Higher Education in Brazil, a passionate advocate of internationalization in higher education, and a personal friend. So I thank him very much for being with us this time. Thank you all for watching this webinar. We had at the highest point over 270 people watching the stream live. If you need a certificate from this event, please see the instructions on the descriptions below. And we hope to see you on our next seminar on June the 7th at the same time, 11 a.m. in Brazil. Once again, thank you very much for being here, to our guests, and thank you for watching. See you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Hasta luego.
Hasta luego.
Thank you. Merci. Gracias.
Gracias. Até logo.